Hi, so I'm here for another DrumWise Meets, and today I'm with top UK drummer Steve White. Hi, Steve.
Hello there, Tom. How's it going?
So, Steve, what equipment do you regularly use? What's your main setup?
I've got a nice selection of Yamaha drums as my core. I've got a recording custom kit, and I've also got one of the hybrid kits. I absolutely love those drums, and I do augment them with sort of various elements of my collection. I have a fairly extensive snare drum collection. And I'm quite passionate about things like Radio King snare drums, old American snare drums. I've used a lot of those kind of drums on recordings over the years to various degrees of success. So it's a combination of a fairly standard setup, nothing too flash. There's no gong drums anymore, nothing like that. And good quality snare drums and a tried and tested set of cymbals. And that's what I'm kind of using.
What age did you start drumming, and what bands inspired you when you were growing up?
I started when I was about 9, 10, showing an interest by a boys' brigade. And it was always something that, although I was never discouraged to do it, I was not encouraged to do it. I had parents that were very supportive of but busy. My mum worked in the health service. My dad was a builder. So they kind of didn't have the time to indulge the way that we maybe do these days. So I kind of got into it as my own pursuit. Something clicked with me. And when I joined the Boys Brigade, I just fell in love with the idea of drumming. I loved it, and sort of started out on this little journey that was really my own journey for probably 2 years, from like 9 to 11. I got myself a practice pad, and I learned to play 5-stroke rows and paradiddles and things like that. And I just used to practice. I just used to play. I used to enjoy it. I never needed to be encouraged or shouted at to do it. And really, for about 2 years, I was under the instruction of the Boys Brigade. And then when I went to secondary school, pretty much, I got my first drum lessons from a guy called George Scott, who was kind of approaching 80 at that point. So he was a very old school drummer. But I learned a lot from him about snare drum techniques, and also exposing me to players like Gene Krupa and to Buddy Rich and to Louis Bellson, which became an obsession. And at a very early age, like 11, 12, I used to sort of bother my dad about going to see Buddy Rich play when he was playing at Catford and playing at Ronnie Scott's. And my dad used to take me, and we used to go and see Louis Bellson quite regularly at the Fairfield Halls in Croydon. And I just absorbed it and loved it. I have lots of interesting kind of thoughts about nature over nurture. And as I say, I was never particularly, you're going to be hot house to be to be a successful drummer. I just absolutely love doing it. And I'm quite interested in that, obviously being involved in education, because sometimes you probably find yourself, you get to teach younger drummers, and you've got all your amazing facility there in your studio and things that we never even had when I was growing up. And yet they're not interested, they don't kind of pay attention. It's a really strange thing. So whereas I had a pair of sticks and a practice pad, and I just never stopped. And I never got my first drum kit till I was like 11 or 12. And that was it. I just absolutely loved it. And then I had to join the Musicians Union because I wanted to do gigs. And the first time I ever went to a meeting, I got up and played, and I got asked to join a band doing covers and just doing a dance stuff. And I never looked back. I never stopped gigging from when I was 14 to when I went into sixth form at school, and then left school, got the gig with Glenn Tilbrook and Chris Difford. And then after that, got the gig with the Style Council when I was 17. And it was just like one long, I've never done anything else, which is really weird.
Which is great.
Yeah. Don't know about that. That might not change. That might change now, though.
Do you have an all-time favourite drummer?
I have many, as we all do. But Buddy Rich does retain a very special place in my heart. I've kind of collected Buddy memorabilia since I was a kid. I've got every edition of Modern Drummer ever, and I've got all of the Buddy Rich issues. I've got downbeats, and I've got lots of programs, and I've got probably every vinyl that he released, probably 100 different albums and different variations, and I've got drumsticks that he gave me when I was a kid, and
Wow.
so I have a real affinity and love for Buddy. I love the description of Buddy, as I love people like Bruce Lee, and I love people like Pele, and I love people that are, you know, Muhammad Ali. I love people that are kind of forces of nature, and I think that Buddy was a force of nature. And nowadays, we know how many amazing drummers out there. You know, we know how many there are, and technique has gone sort of off the scale, but nobody did it with such aplomb and style as Buddy. And he got to play with Sinatra and Sammy Davis and Count Basie and Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and Nat King Cole and Oscar Peterson and all these musicians that he got to not only be a genius drummer within, but was also making great music. And there's some genius drummers around at the moment, but a lot of the music they make is terrible, you know, and it's just geared to showing their chops off, and I don't get that. And Buddy played, and Louis Bellson too, you know. I think the closest for me these days, one of my other all-time favorites is Vinnie Colaiuta. He's, you know, a genius drummer, uncompromised musically, absolutely brilliant. And it's those kind of players that transcend their ability to play the drums, you know, like forces of nature, but actually become incredible musicians as well. Not only great drummers, but incredible musicians. So Buddy, you know, for me as a kid, because of my obsession with all the things that surrounded him, but I just think he had something really, really kind of spirit about him that I absolutely love.
A lot of people watching this will have watched your Sky Arts program. Just to say that I'm thank you for making that, because that was just brilliant, and it's just something that I can say to every student: have you seen this? If you haven't seen it, you need to see it.
It was a massive honour to be asked by Sky Arts to do that, and you know, we got a great team together that you know, that really understood what it was all about. And the most daunting thing when we sat down is that when we actually targeted drummers, we had like 220 drummers that we wanted to talk about, and we just couldn't do it, and we had to leave some, you know, we had to kind of decide fairly early on that we were going to have to make it reasonably rock and roll centric, because we couldn't, the subject of trying to take on jazz in 4 shows was absolutely, it was just too much. So we did our best. We really tried to be as inclusive and as educational and as entertaining as possible. Still got the, you know, but you didn't have this and you didn't have that. We got it down to, I think, 38 contributors, and thought, well, if we get 25, we'll have done well. But pretty much everybody agreed to do it, which was amazing.
That's brilliant. And likewise, this is why I love drummers, because, you know, we are a little community, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think so.
And with right now with this, I've messaged people just out of the blue. I've explained what it is, and so far no one said no.
No.
I just think we're all just kind of we're in this together, and we like to chat about stuff, and, you know.
That's because that, you know, and this is the thing is, I'm not a religious person, but, you know, that doesn't sort of mean to say that you can't believe in spirituality, and spirituality, drums, you know, in essence, drums came about by almost like an imitation of the human heartbeat. We are born with a rhythm, and the last thing that we're, you know, conscious of is a rhythm that expires, and that's our time on the planet gone. And so I think that anybody that gets drums into their heart, whether they're a professional player or, you know, all around the world there are people that play drums. You know, the Africans have an amazing culture around drums. You know, burials, funerals, weddings, war, joy, love. Drums are part of the very sort of DNA of the continent. And I think that anybody that gets the bug actually inadvertently gets a little bit caught up with some of that DNA, because drummers are not, you know, there's not another instrument where you get so much community. And that's not knocking guitarists, bass players or anything else, but drummers by and large are warm, they're friendly, they are inclined to share and be supportive, you know, which is really unique. And that is because I think that drums do actually retain a part of us, or contain a part of us that is actually as close to spiritual as I've ever kind of encountered, really, in my sort of time on this planet.
What you said about the heartbeat and stuff, that's amazing.
It's absolutely true, because and I'm not recommending it, but if you play samba, you know, which has that kind of repetitive kind of, you know, it's a baby's heartbeat will react, and you know it'll speed up because it's rhythm. It's rhythm, and you know, it's there from pre-birth.
Yeah. What would you say the highlight of your career is so far?
Oh, I've not had it yet. I'm still looking for it. I've been incredibly lucky and you know, and to be fair, I have worked pretty hard at what I've done over the years. And I've never sort of deemed, you know, I'm not a particularly you know, I'm going to blow my own trumpet kind of thing. I've always got the role of a drummer as somebody that accompanies and somebody that tries to sort of contribute to bring things together. But in the process of that, I've managed to, I think I managed to work out very early on that making songwriters happy ensured a good career. And having a track record in the studio of songs that this country has taken to its heart, you know, things like You're the Best Thing and You Did Something to Me and Broken Stones, those kind of, ironically, ballads, which is the thing, because stuff that is too aggressive musically, it just comes in terms of its appeal to a limited audience. But if you can play on something that's a ballad and you can get the guys sort of dancing with the girls, or the guys dancing with the boys, girls dancing with the girls, I don't care. But if you can make something that is you know, that gets out into a community, that's something to be really, really proud of. And you know, my recorded sort of legacy, you know, I did something like nearly 400 songs with Paul and Style Council solo, and then other artists that I've got to work with, from Ian Dury to John Miles to you know, John Martin, sorry, to Matt Dayton. You know, there's another 600-700 recordings, and that to me is the proudest thing. And I love adding to them. I love kind of adding new recordings, and I'm still doing a lot of stuff. But obviously, it's changed the way that the industry's changed. So I don't really play. I don't really kind of look too much creatively to making too much of a living from playing new music. I just do it because I really enjoy it.
Mm. And while we're talking about different artists that you've played for and so on, I'm in a touring like tribute band. So we're called Purple Zeppelin. So yeah. It's Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
It's, as you can imagine, it's quite a tough gig. Trying to imitate those two guys.
Paice and Bonham,
and Bonham. But obviously, reading up on you, the John Lord thing.
Yeah.
I think that any Purple Zeppelin fans that watch this, because probably this will end up on their social media too, would just be interested in the John Lord thing.
It was incredible, and John remains one of the in terms of people that I've met in my life, John remains a highlight of just being not only an amazing musician, but an incredible person. And I toured and worked with John over a period of a few years. It wasn't intense, in lots of different situations. And basically the day after I finished with Paul and had this meeting about not doing the tour that we were supposed to be going to be doing the following few months, my phone went and it was John, and John said, "Hey Steve, you know, I've heard that you're not playing with Paul anymore." And I went, "No, that's kind of got about," because we were both friends with Suzanne Lee Barnes, who ran Wheeler's End Studios, that was Noel Gallagher's studio. So she knew John and mentioned that I wasn't playing with Paul anymore. And he called me up like literally the next day as I was thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And it was like John Lord, you know, and you know, I was just like, a bit, right? Okay. And he said, look, you know, I came to that concert you did at the Albert Hall, and he said, and you did that drum solo, you know, you remember that song? You did the drum solo. I said, oh yeah, Picking Up Sticks. He went, yeah. He said, it reminded me of Paice, you know, come and have a blow, you know. And he was so friendly. And then he sent all the parts over for like concerto for group and orchestra, and we used to do some Purple songs as well. And it was just an absolute a blast. He was the most amazing man to be around. He would sit and a very modest person, and he would just literally begin talking and say, well, when I was with Jimmy in New York and Mitch was playing, and you go, really? You know, like, and he would just talk about the people that he played with. And I knew that, you know, not only was he a very forward-thinking musician, even up until just before he passed, but it was an absolutely wonderful guy, and I adored all the time that I got to spend with him. You know, when he passed away, it really hit me hard. I really, because we were due to go and do some recording and to go and play. We had some gigs lined up, but I think the last gig that I did with John was in Mulhouse in just on the Swiss border. I think it's in France, but it's just right near the Swiss border. And we played this, you know, wonderful gig, and you know, and I really was beginning to get, you know, I ditched the charts. I didn't need the charts anymore, and I could just watch John, and I knew, and playing with these 70-piece orchestras with these world-class conductors. And I remember being in the bar after, and we were standing around chatting and having a drink, and I'm talking to Frida from ABBA, and it was like literally, Jesus Christ, this is amazing, you know. And I was so happy playing with John, and you know, his life was suddenly, it was, you know, like that 1 minute there, next minute.
Yeah. Oh, well, thanks for talking about that. That's brilliant. I just thought that
and Paice as well. You know, I got to do a concert. John was involved in a thing called the Sunflower Charity, which you know, all of, you know, that kind of musician were involved in, and we did this. It's like a fundraiser, and I got to play with Ian Paice, and he set his kit up next to mine with the hi-hat next to mine, you know, lefty, and we were just doing the songs, and it's just such a hero of mine. You know, Made in Japan is probably my favorite rock album. You know, because I got to play at the Nakano Sun Plaza where it was recorded. We recorded an album there ourselves, and you know, got to talk to John about what happened. You know, and he went, well, it's a great hall. We had a great engineer, and we played great that night. It was those couple of nights. It was like, yeah, you did.
And just Ian Pace's drumming is just, I never really appreciated how incredible it was until I tried to actually copy it and try and play it the same, you know, or at least not the same, but similar, because there's no way I'm going to play it the same.
Ian was one of the people that I really wanted on the Art of Drumming documentary, because I think that you know, he takes a little while to warm, but once he does, he's incredible company. He's a real dry sense of humor. He's a lovely guy, and you know, and a huge influence. You know, I loved Ian Paice as a young drummer because of that, you know, getting Made in Japan as a kid. But he was really philosophical and said some amazing things about British drummers, and you know, said that, which I thought was really incredible and made me feel very, very proud of the legacy. That, you know, when drummers in this country were younger, and I kind of count myself at the lower end of that, we had very little information. We had, you know, there wasn't loads and loads of teachers. There were good teachers, but they were few and far between. So what we had was this enthusiasm and this these tasters of records and you know, things like Radio Caroline and you know, little things that you could latch onto, but not lots and lots of education. But whereas the Americans were very much primed to be playing with you know, Jim Chapin's books and the Jim Blackley books and stick control, whereas we never had quite the access to that. But what that produced, that combination of enthusiasm, which was exactly the same as the Americans, was personality. And if you actually take that legacy of drummers, you know, John Bonham, Keith Moon, Ian Paice, Cozy Powell, Mitch Mitchell, Ringo, Ginger, you know, those are still the guys that we look to for inspiration 50 years later. It's incredible.
Yeah. Cool. I knew this was going to be a good one, talking to you. I wish I could retain just some of the stuff I'm so rubbish at remembering stuff. I need to just.
I've got quite a good memory. I've got, you know, for drumming stuff. It's like, it's really, you know, I'm quite good. It's the other things I'm terrible at.
So, when you first get a gig with a new artist, how are you expected to learn the songs? So, would you just be sent the songs on Spotify, or are you sent the sheet music, or do you listen to it and chart it out yourself? Because you mentioned charts earlier. So kind of how does that work for you?
It's probably a combination of everything. I mean, I'm not one for let's just do it, let's just wing it and jam it. That's not me. I don't like that. Preparation is everything for me. I like to be prepared. I like to know where there's hits. I like to know if there's a time signature change. So I'm all about upfront. I want as much information from the artist as possible. And generally, I will do my own charts. It's something that Greg Bissonette and I have in common. Is like the cheat sheets that we write out, and only we can read what's actually on them, because it's like, you know, go back to the top, a little pair of eyes, all that kind of individual stuff that we have. So generally, by the time that say some of the recent stuff that I've done, I kind of know the song. That is always, you know, as much as I can possibly understand what the song is about. And I'll also ask the writer, what is this song about? Is it, you know, can you give me some clues as to what's going on in your head? And that was something that I found very important with Paul Weller, just asking about what's this song about, you know, and what am I trying to sort of suggest with my drumming to support this song. So for me, preparation is everything. And then when I generally, when I start to track, it's the simpler the better. And I like to kind of go in and get something down very much that is limited in terms of fills. It's just kind of going with the less is more principle. And if, you know, now we've got this lovely ability to give alternate takes, you know, so I can give a take, because I've got my own studio now, and remote recording is something that I do quite a bit. So I can give like 2 or 3 takes now and say, right, here's the kind of basic one that, you know, here's the arrangement. I'm just going to keep it really simple. And that may be what's absolutely required. Or there's take 4 and I'm kind of going nuts, and you can use what you like, which I love. I love that kind of creativity and freedom. But it's all for me about preparation. It's all, you know, I don't just kind of turn up and try and wing it, because I hate it, because I feel very insecure doing that.
There you go. Preparation is key.
Yeah, absolutely. Was it fail to prepare, prepare to fail?
Exactly. Okay, first curveball question. So, what are your hobbies away from drumming?
Well, I've got 4 children of various ages, so I don't know if I could describe them as a hobby, but being involved with my children is obviously really important. I've got my eldest son, Curtis, who's like 27. He enjoys football and I enjoy football. So we kind of go to football. We go to watch the mighty Charlton Athletic, where, you know, that's our thing. We go to pretty much all the home games, and I like to do that. My daughter, she kind of likes to go out, and we like to go out and eat, and we enjoy Japanese food, and we do stuff like that. And then I've got 2 younger lads who are twins. They'll be 10 in September. And they are obsessed with football. They're Manchester City supporters, unfortunately, and they're into Taekwondo, and they're doing really, really well with that. So my hobbies are kind of with, you know, first and foremost involve family. But then beyond that, we have a dog. We have a Hungarian sheepdog, a Puli, which is a really tireless breed of dog that requires 2 to 3 hours of walking a day. So me and my wife will walk. But then it really revolves around friends. We've got an amazing group of friends that we're very, very protective around, and very, very loyal with, from the arts and from entertainment, and just, you know, just really a good variety of people. And we're very kind of in with our friends, and we love to go out socializing. I love cooking. I do enjoy cooking myself, and and you know, beyond that, nothing too exciting. I don't really do the mountain climbing anymore, that kind of thing. But it's a full and very kind of satisfying existence alongside all of the music that I'm kind of still involved in, which, so, you know, I am kept very busy.
What do you think makes a good drummer?
A good drummer is it's personality, above and beyond. It's having a voice on the instrument. It's where you can kind of listen to somebody and go, ah, that's Ringo, or that's Buddy. Above and beyond that, it's musicianship. It's your ability to appreciate what the role of the drummer is, which is to keep time and to support the music. And that's what all of my favourite drummers do, whether it's Vinnie Colaiuta or Al Jackson Jr. or, you know, or Clyde Stubblefield, you know. And it's not all about technique. Far from it. You know, technique, you know, which is wonderful. It's a real achievement to pursue exemplary technique. But at a certain point, it's kind of, you've got to think as a craftsman. The technique is your tools, and, you know, you don't just keep your tools in a box and shiny, and, you know, you use them. And that is where music comes into it. So above everything, it's an ability to listen, and to exert a personality musically, you know, onto a piece of music. That, I think, is what the role of a drummer is, and the successful drummer. And somebody that I think does that absolutely incredibly, is one of my favourite of all time drummers, is Hal Blaine. And if you go onto Spotify, there's an 8.5 hour playlist of all the hits that Hal Blaine played on, and you kind of just have to sit there with a glass of wine, if it's your thing, and open your jaw and just respect what that guy did for popular music. Incredible.
Have you ever had anything, when you've been playing live, have you ever had anything go wrong that's been, you know, particularly bad that you've had to recover from?
It happened all the time, and I think that, you know, like things like bass drum pedals would like just disintegrate, or heads going through. I mean, when you were doing the amount of gigs that, you know, I did with Paul, you know, stuff happened, you know. And the thing I kind of got to learn was that when something goes wrong on stage, you feel that time, and everybody in the time is like standing still. And everybody in the audience is watching you because you need to change a bass drum pedal. And it's not true. Most things can be kind of sorted out in 30, 40 seconds if you don't lose your, you know, if you don't panic. You're usually pumped full of adrenaline. So you think everyone's looking at me and it's all going to be terrible. And it's like, so I kind of stopped drawing attention to things like that. And I do remember a bass drum skin going when we played Braintree Arena, which it's a big halls place in Essex, and bass drum skin just went, and my tech Rog just came on, and it's like, well, we can't carry on, you can't play without a bass drum skin. So I said to Paul, bass drum skin's gone. He's like, oh, okay, and he just did Wildwood on his own. And by the time that the bass player was playing, and by the time that he'd finished Wildwood and, you know, did the outro, bass drum was back in place, bang, 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 let's go. You know, it was. I think the more that you did, I mean, I did probably 1,000 shows with Paul over the years. You just kind of get to the point where you just think, right, no point in panicking. Let's just chill out, and the audience won't notice.
Probably the most important question of this session here. We've had some really varied answers on this one so far. So, what's your favourite biscuit?
Wow, it's probably what I've just had before I came into the drum room with a cup of tea, which is a ginger nut. You know, you can't beat a ginger nut. It's, I mean, a chocolate hobnob does kind of come into it, but not so good with tea. As a treat, my dog does like a rich tea, so we can be found sort of sharing a rich tea now and then if she's been a good girl. So yeah, but I think ginger nut has got to be the king of biscuits.
And is it a dunked ginger nut or just
no dry?
Alongside the tea, okay.
Right, alongside the tea, you know, okay. to respect the flavours.
Yeah. Brilliant. Something to mention before I ask you my last question. So I had a student who was a really big Paul Weller fan, and he used to loved Stanley Road, and that was his song. And a couple of years ago, sadly, he died. He was about 60, so way too young. I just thought I would say to you that he loved your drumming on that song.
See, that's the thing that I find such an honour, because of the legacy of appreciating the art of the songwriter and understanding very early on how good Paul Weller actually is as a songwriter and as a lyricist and as a musician. And it's really interesting because now things like that make me quite really feel, in the sort of light of the current situation, as a musician, you feel a bit useless sort of sat in your drum room while people are going out and doing proper jobs. But then you think and remember that people, when this is all over, are going to want to go and have a few beers and watch a band and lose it and get drunk, and that's our job, and that's kind of, we're part of that, and I'm not being flippant. But I've had that beautifully expressed. Somebody, you do something to me was at my wedding, and somebody actually came up and said, I lost my mum and she had broken stones at her funeral, and you just feel an incredible sense of honour, and it feels really humbling that you've played on something, even though I'm the drummer, I'm not the lyricist, that has touched people. And I'm very lucky because we did a Twitter party with Tim Burgess from the Charlatans the other night, and you all go on at 9 or 10 o'clock, and you put the record on and you tweet about it, and and this was about our favourite shot, which was made in 1984. So that's a long time ago now, and the reaction that it got on the night was incredible. Thousands and thousands of people were following it up, and the questions were coming thick and fast, and you just think, wow, that is really amazing that you were lucky enough to play on something that was recorded nearly 40 years ago and still create such enthusiasm and love from fans that appreciate it. That is an honour.
Yeah, it must be lovely to know that people are, as you say, it doesn't matter if you're the singer or anything. Drums are our thing. So for people to be hearing your beat, and no matter if they're just dancing to it at their wedding, they're dancing to the beat, aren't they? So
to play on the focus when I first started was all about being in a band. You wanted to be in a band, you wanted to play, you wanted to make a bit of money. That was how it was done. And the focus now on drumming is not, you don't have to be in a band. There are some very, very famous, well-respected drummers globally that don't play with bands. They do their thing as drummers, and that's absolutely wonderful. But it has changed, because from when I was back in the, when I first started, your role was, if you went to see a drummer do a drum clinic, it was because they were playing with their band over in London, and somebody would put a drum clinic on with the drummer that was playing. Nowadays, drummers play on their own. They get the backing tracks and they do all the kind of stuff. And that is what it is. It's great, and it brings a lot of joy. But for me, to hear a drummer that plays on a really good record, that's the next level. That's like you've got your technique, you've got your you've got your chops, but now you're kind of putting your voice across, and that's why you listen to sort of like the Beatles recordings, and you listen to Ringo, and you listen to how good he was as a rock and roll drummer, and how supportive and how visionary and experimental all his stuff was. That is, if you don't understand that as a young drummer, you are missing such a massive part of what it means to play this instrument.
If you could give one bit of advice to up-and-coming drummers, what would that piece of advice be?
Well, the main thing with anything that, musically or creative, is that you have to start off with a love of it and try to maintain that love of it. That is whether you're, an actor, an author, a filmmaker, or a musician. Because we're doing stuff that comes from the heart, it has to be approached with love. And what I would say is do everything to continue to nurture and protect that love of music. don't think that just because you're not able to make a living from playing an instrument, that makes you any less valid as a musician. You know, most people that pick up an instrument globally don't think of it in terms of the concept of I'm a professional musician. They do stuff, they maybe farm, or they're a doctor, or they're whatever, and then they get home and they pick a guitar up, or they play the drums or whatever. That is the experience for the vast majority of people. So it's not in any way kind of a failure if you can't make a living as a musician. But what I would say is that once you've kind of started it, don't let anything to take away from your love of music, because even if you don't end up becoming you know, a famous drummer or a famous saxophone player, you will find that music will be a friend that will accompany you for the whole of your life. So don't let that flame go out.
So Steve, thanks so much for spending your time with us here at DrumWise today. Stay safe and all the best.
All the best to everybody.